Good evening. Welcome to Investigator News. And I'm your host, Ellie, and this is in Legends of Myths and Monsters. And boy, I had a surprise this morning um, on how to hunt. He's a Bigfoot guy, and he happened to mention our names, my name and Investigative News. Um, he is. He reads stories of Bigfoot, and I submitted my Bigfoot story here a while back. And so he read it this morning. And let's see, the facts of the facts by howtohunt.com. I'm going to submit the link to it. Oops, I guess I can't do that, huh? Um, Let me reload it. I'm not sure if I could show his page or
Let
not.
this soft mineral melt in your mouth.
Okay. I believe that is it. Okay, but it's the facts by howtohunt.com. His name is Steve, and my story is at the 27 mark. It came out this morning. So if you guys are interested in watching it, give a thumbs up on it that you watched it over here on our site, or you're going to watch it. So that way I know how many people watched it. So I have submitted quite a few little bits and pieces of information on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the giants, my perspective, and what I've been saying on my show. So for him to mention us, that is great. This is something that happened to me in high school. I thought a bear, I thought it was haunted. I didn't know. So anyway, go on over and watch it. Tonight is Werewolves. And I don't want to spend too much time on the facts by how to hunt and our Bigfoot story. I'd rather get on with our show. Yeah, all your furry friends. So yeah, I didn't quite see it. I didn't see it. It was my friend. But we had some interesting things happen up in Tahoe back in the 70s. And of course, they didn't have cameras, and the hair that I had, I didn't keep. I didn't know what to do with it. So anyway, go on over and watch it after you watch the show. So, um, wow, werewolves, human to animal shape shifting creatures. That is this worldwide phenomenon. The were predatory beasts exist in all kinds of forms. Were hyenas, were tigers, were panthers, were jaguars. But the werewolf is the most notorious of them all. There's not much history um, behind the infamous shapeshifters to trace the beginnings of the werewolf. But they say it was in Europe in their entrance into the modern literature and pop culture. Now we know from the Greek gods that they were able to shapeshift or mate with beasts. And there is a good possibility that's where the werewolf came from. The first thing to understand about the history of the werewolf is there's no single origin. Legends of these lupin shapeshifters are also numerous and widespread. Their pervasiveness makes identifying one universal definition of the origin of the wolf human monster challenging. Despite of the werewolf's widespread appearance in folklore, I'll have to admit I really given the werewolf attention it deserves. Um, and then now I decide to present it to you because, you hear so many stories and people seeing wolf like creatures still to this day. The wolf has symbolized everything from an admirable warrior to figures of greed, even devil in disguise. These near silent, deadly predators were at one point the most widely distributed land mammal. Um, Claiming the large swaths of the globe. as their hunting grounds, and wolves posed a very real threat to humans and their livestock. It still seemed that we had admired these animals. Our ancestors adorned the skins of predators while hunting, perhaps to camouflage themselves or to evoke the spirit of the animal during the hunt. As archaeological artifacts in ancient art reveal. Um, Let me see if I got this. So I hope the sound isn't too much. So anyway, well, I kind of wanted it a little bit bigger. There we go. All right. So a little bit of um, history and pictures of the werewolf for you. So humans and wolves existed both as allies and enemies, while some wolves were eventually domesticated for hunting and protection. These early connections set the stage for a complex relationship between man, wolf, and the were hybrid. But does that mean werewolves were originally a universal monster? Or were the other factors that came to play? To understand the origin of the werewolf more clearly, Kaja Franek, she's a werewolf expert and visiting professor at the University of Hertfordshire. Wolves themselves exist in many different countries and in many different continents. And because of this, they have become powerful symbols of the animal. Wolves and their behavior is often very similar to how humans exist. They live in families or packs. They hunt as packs. They are they predate the same creatures that we'd like um, to eat ourselves. And it also makes sense that the folklore would absorb these creatures and they would reoccur in myths and in legends. And he would see them exist on the boundaries of what was to be human, what was it to be, or an animal. The connection between the wolves and humans are deeply ingrained in ancient literature and lore. These early stories seem to categorize the werewolf into three different types: the victim, where the innocent person is cursed and turned into a wolf but maintains a human reason; the damned, who are violent, and they're humans that become wolves as a punishment to both their body and soul; and the warrior, where the humans take the guise of the wolf and aid in excess to battle. These oldest piece of surviving literatures, known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, portrays a victim werewolf that is widely considered the oldest werewolf story on record. And this is written between 1300 and 1000 BCE. And it tells of an unlucky shepherd whom the goddess Iana turns into a wolf. There's not very many she wolves in the wolf history, but in contrast, the werewolves of ancient Greece and Roman mythology portrayed as the damned werewolf and representing tradition of human wolf transformation disguised by deviant deeds. In the Greek text, Europeus, Olympians, I'm sorry, a man has turned into a wolf for 10 years as punishment for eating humans. And cannibalism is a recurring theme in ancient myths that the wolf transformed as a cautionary tale. Linking human cannibalism to wolves isn't that far fetched. Wolves are above all opportunist eaters. In addition to scavenging animal corpses of all kinds, includes humans, wolves have been known to eat the remains of their own species. In the first century, Pliny wrote Naturalis Historia, associated human cannibalism with wolf like behavior and features. About AC, it metamorphoses, interprets another Greek legend about the god Zeus and the king Lycaon of Arcadia. Now, according to the story, the Roman god Jupiter I'm sorry, hears rumors of King Laocoon, which practices human sacrifices and cannibalism. So he descends into the earth in human form to discover the truth. And Laocoon is convinced of Jupiter's divinity, and it decides to put uh, to the test. He kills, he butchers, and attempts to serve human flesh to the gods. And Jupiter is appalled by the crime and deception. So he destroys the king household in a mad rage. And distraught, Lachion takes to the fields howling, driven mad by his own misdeeds. And he begins to slaughter the flock. And as a horrible transformation takes place, his clothes become his clothes, his hair becomes wild, his arm turned to legs of a dog, and he transformed fully into a wolf. Although his human eyes remain, at the name of Lechion sounds familiar, your wolf sense. The word lycos, meaning wolf, and anthropos, meaning man, inspired the word lycanthropy, the wolf man syndrome. The word was invented early second century by Greek physician Marcellus to define melancholy affliction, identified by the habit of frequently looking at cemeteries and behaving like wolves and dogs. The third ancient werewolf, the warrior, is perhaps the most famous association with berserkers, the ancient Nordic fighters who took on a predatory animal characteristics in battle. Bears, wolves, boars were revered by the berserkers, and it was believed that literally donning the skin of the animal allowed transformation to occur. And this was done a lot by many cultures where they would kill, they would skin, and then they would tan, then wear the animal skin. They would fight with craze, seemingly pre-eternal natural violence, howling and roaring on the battlefield. Instead of separating human from the beast, this concept respects both tandem. However, psychological and physical shape shifting were seen in different concepts. The berserker took the spirit of the animal but did not physically change form. In the 13th century collection of Volsung's, werewolves appear multiple times. In one story, a princess named Signy marries a rival king who, in war, kills her father and captures 10 brothers. One by one, the brothers are eaten by a large, mysterious she wolf. This happens every night until only one, Sigmund, is left. With his sister's help and a little bit of honey, Sigmund kills the wolf, believed to be a human woman in disguise. By biting her tongue off, this now dead creature is believed to be Signy's mother-in-law, who had taken on a wolf form through witchcraft and magic. And it's believed throughout history that this is the true meaning of the werewolf. In another example from the saga, a thieving father and son duo find two magic wolf pelts in the forest on a hut that belong to the indigenous tribes of Indians. Another example, I'm sorry, they put the skins on and transformed into wolves and are horrified to learn they cannot transform back. Unbeknownst to them, the skins can only be removed every 10 days. In wolf form, they decide to separate, but if they meet too much, uh, too much trouble ended up on their hands. And so they decided to separate. But they should howl for help if they needed each other. The son ignores this warning and manages to kill 11 men before severely injuring himself. And after 10 days pass, Both men returned to human form. Horrified by the experience, they burned the magic pelts. And as thieves, the two lived separate from society, embodying wolfish tendency before turning into literal wolves. In the Norse language, though, the word for wolf is varg. And since wolves were considered withdrawn and solitary, varg inspired the word varg, which roughly translates to outlaw. While some argue that were in werewolf comes from Anglo-Saxon word for man, others claim the extra e is common variations of war, and Varg challenged this idea. One thing that does seem clear is the beginning of the infamous fame. Werewolves have been associated with solitude and violence. Itself is somewhat complicated, not always clear. It is said it could be from Old English, a form of German, and a form of the two. Um, what seems to be clear is that it specifically refers to the word wolf, a man wolf, and by man. I don't mean how we use the term man today, meaning mankind, but rather masculine or male. And so the werewolf necessarily means a male monster. And this is certainly has been the case. And find that there are definitely more male werewolves than there are female werewolves. The German Nordic tradition spread across Europe as its people did, while the werewolf stories are found in an indigenous Icelandic sources, but throughout Europe and Germany and all across the United States with our primitive Indians. It is also likely that the Celtic werewolf stories were likewise influenced by ancient Nordic people, especially given with the strongest werewolf traditions, um, a, a strong historical ties to the Vikings. As the werewolf legend spread, different cultures and geographic areas contributed their own stories in staggering numbers and they were all werewolf variations. Even Serbian legend says that one becomes a werewolf if you drink the water from a footprint of a wolf. Danish tradition dictates that Danish men become werewolves or can become werewolves if they use the magic. Russian folklore believed that a witch placing her girdle under a house uh, of an inhabitant on their wedding day will turn all in that are celebrating into wolves once they cross over it. Crazy Russians. Introduction of Christianity saw this ancient beliefs and myths rewritten as pagan and therefore sinful. And so the werewolf became something to be disapproved and denied, and they tried to cover it up. And tried to claim it was a form of mental illness or a demonic influence. Maybe they even needed an exorcism. Human to wolf transformation would be a defiance to or of divinity of God, and only He had the power to alter something completely. But then we find out the Greek gods uh, mixing with the earthen women could become these sort of monsters. The first recorded use of the word werewolf appears in the 11th century in the ecclesiastical ordinances of King Canute, and this was in 1035, where it's used symbolically to warn Christian clergy to be on the look for those who might threaten the congregation as wolves in what they say sheep's clothing. The differences and similarities in the European werewolves and under Christian reflect the dominant anxieties and the values of Europe during the Middle Ages. And one such example emerged in the reoccurring sympathetic werewolf, where the human soul trapped in a wolf body could be saved if they showed their devotion to God, believed in God, Christ, and would submit to an exorcism. Celtic traditions of werewolves from the time developed to shape into a creature, into victims suffering from involuntary transformation. Interpretation that reflects the heavy influence of the Christianity in the country is illustrated as the Archean con and historian Gerald of Wales account of the landscape to the people of Ireland. And it was published in the 12th century. A topographaria narrates an encounter between priest and werewolf. The monster asks a holy man for communion, at last rites, for his wife, who is also a werewolf. The fact that it was revealed when a desperate male, the werewolf pulls back her wolf skins to reveal a severely elderly woman that has been plagued as a she wolf all her life. Another European werewolf traditions grew as well. The sympathetic werewolf was joined by the werewolf lover. And the tales of a woman is attacked by a wolf who rips off some of her clothes, usually an apron or a skirt. Later, he returns to human form, and the woman recognizes as the werewolf by clothing and the threads between his teeth. In some versions, the women escape by throwing off their clothing, which the werewolf attacks instead. Scholars often read these stories as symbolic of sexual assault against women. There is also the wounded werewolf, where the male, a human form of the werewolf, is only revealed when the beast is struck by a knife or a piece of wood, or they found out a silver sharp object. Now, that is this his human identity is revealed. He is no longer a threat. Then there is the backrider or wolf rider, stories where man transforms into a werewolf with the help of special pelt or skin. These werewolves would cling onto the back of a male victim. And during the Middle Ages, werewolf legends evolved and expanded and become more widespread and more demonized by the church. Reports of the werewolf activity increased. Barry Lopez, in his book of Wolves and Men, suggests that the reason why that the werewolf was changing in terms was a depiction, in part because what the way wolves were seen in 14 countries in Europe, and the farming was changing, and it become more about sheep, and the sheep became the center of the economy in Europe. Now, unfortunately, not only did the humans like the sheep, but so did the wolves, and the wolves would constantly take half their flock. And suddenly there was a sense that the wolves, predating that the wolves were destroying these expensive sheep, and because of the pre-existent symbolism within. And then they, in the midst of the sheep, they were seeing what seemed to be wolves that could walk on their hind feet. And the religion within the Christianity regarding the wolf and the sheep is God's flock. It quite nicely fitted in together. The wolf became seen more monstrous and more and even more evil, and therefore the wealth became seen more monstrous. So they had to get rid of all of the wolves to get rid of the one that could walk on its hind legs. And that transformation into the wolf was necessarily not was necessarily an evil thing, most likely caused by the enemy of God, the devil, according to the church. As werewolf stories continue to rise in popularity, it was an official sin in the Christianity to believe in werewolves and even vampires, because it suggested that beings other than God could alter the physical substance. However, beginning in the later 16th century, it was considered uh, heretical not to believe in werewolves. That change came after the church shifted its attention to persecuting witches. This change seems an attempt to deal with the proliferation of the werewolves, at the same time, deal with the fact of the myth of Wells. And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And so it made more sense to just suggest the devil literally could transform a man into the wolf. And I think this is because the church saw that it was far better to keep responding and adapting and absorbing these beliefs rather than absolutely refuting them. And they had to believe because so many of the priests from Europe, Germany, and even the earliest popes had written it down about a man becoming a wolf. And it was by shape shifting into wolves. And also the witchcraft accusations. And it all accompanied by charges of cannibalism. So part of the rise of the so-called werewolf trials, which you don't hear much about, is also due to the text identifying punishing witches. It's called the Malleus Maleficarum, and is co-authored by Catholic clergymen and inquisitors, Kramer and Springer. After its publication in 1486, this legal and theological text not only became standard for witch hunting, it served as a handbook. I gotta restart this. Um, um, Handbook for the approved tortured of those accused. So this linked it to the Salem witch trials, but they also included werewolves. And it's written in this um, um, co-authored Catholic rule of law of a book. And it was how to even dispose of the werewolves and the witches. And it was through torture. And the text claimed that the witches were able to turn into wolves, although this metamorphosis was an illusion rather than a true transformation. It was the devil, they say, who helped produce the glamours and the kind of magic that makes things appear different from their true form. In this case, making someone appear as a wolf. The werewolf glamour increased strength, speed, and intelligence, all the advantages to help them kill and eat humans. The medieval Christian demonologist also believed the devil could appear in the form of a wolf, a lizard, ghost, witch, or anything a demonic creature it wanted to. The rise in the Christian doctrine condemning witchcraft is the only one factor to why cannibalistic werewolf accusations rose. The Black Death, or the bubonic plague, is another. By the end of the 14th century, it's estimated that anywhere from 20 to 75% of the global population succumbed to the Black Death. Fewer people meant um, it meant basically less encroachment on the wolf's natural habitat, and therefore uh, the roving wolf packs did increase. They ate livestock and occasionally attacked humans, which corresponded increase in where werewolf accusations became more throughout Europe. In France, believed in werewolf in the Loup Garou, men destined to become werewolves at the full moon were at all-time high during the Inquisition, with 30,000 reported cases between 1520 and 1630. Not surprising given to the aim of the combat heresy. And when French colonizers traveled to places like Canada, Haiti, Louisiana, the loup garou took on a traditional characteristics and encountered the folklore of indigenous and enslaved peoples. Wolves that traveled to the New World and the settlers and the colonizers who came from Europe, these creatures that we had thought maybe we had destroyed or left behind in many ways, only seem men that kept it quiet, kept it a secret. The landscape seemed to be landscape of nightmares. Now colonizers made use in some way of these pre-existing myths. It gave function, for those wolves had to be destroyed. Unfortunately, the hatred of the wolves would be misapplied as well for their indigenous population. So it really gave the wolves a bad rap, and it would give uh, a way for someone to have a reason to kill all the pack of wolves that were around their houses or the places that they dwelled. And so the way that Walter, this is seen as a savage creature and used in intimately recessed and violent terms against the Native Americans themselves. And in the deaths of uh, some of the American Native Indians, they claim that those were the skinwalkers. And it was done alongside the death of the Native Americans. And the werewolf trials in Central and Western Europe peaked in the 17th century. The label werewolf could be applied to someone who engaged in heinous crimes outside witchcraft, like murder, cannibalism, rape. And in many cases, shape shifting was less significant, and the murder and the cannibalism associated with the change. And in fact, in the 16th century, many werewolf executions reported by the Catholic Church involved confessions of men eating human flesh, particularly that of children. And in the 16th century, also, werewolf gained more notoriety than German farmer Peter Stube. And it was said that he made a deal with the devil that allowed him to take the shame of a wolf in order to kill men, women, and children without getting caught for over 25 years. Stube was captured by a group of hunters looking for the beast that had slaughtered their families. Not only did he eat and kill men, women, and children, but he had a thirst for sheep and other livestock. Their dogs succeeded in chasing down this wolf, but the hunters lost sight of it only to see Stube in the same spot that the wolf had vanished. The hunters assumed he had removed his werewolf girdle or skin and regained his human form. And after a little torture on the rack, he quickly confessed and procuring the girdle, becoming a wolf, and that he admitted to murdering 14 children and 2 pregnant women. He reportedly killed his own son and ate his brain, committing incest with his daughter and sister. It was rumored to have a long affair with a she devil demon sent to him by Satan himself. His daughter and mistress were also tried and found guilty of accessories to these murders. And this was written down on October 31st, 1589. And they were all executed. And Stube was laid on the wheel and burning of pincers. And they were pulled, what it did, it pulled the flesh off his body, his legs and arms were broken. His head was removed, the body burned to ash. His daughter and mistress were burned to death by stake. And Stube's severed head was put on a spiked pole and displayed below a wooden carving of a wolf. The cruelty of the crimes and punishment immortalized in 1590 as an English narrative, a true disclosure declaring the damnable life and death of one Stube Peter, the first popular werewolf narrative in England. The Great Britain's interest in the monster, after all, had been basically proven to be true. And the previous few centuries after, aggressive wolf cleansing campaigns happened using the wolf trials and claiming they were witches and wolves. The Stube case, like others, are today recognized by many scholars as evidence of early human serial killers rather than supernatural werewolf. This reflects a movement that began hundreds of years before history attempted to rationalize or explain the actions of these who claim to be wolf shapeshifters. While today there is an extinction between the fictional werewolf and the condition of uh, lycanthropy, the two ideas were intertwined for most of history. As this as the second century, we and well into the 18th century, that uh, someone that would refer to the literal transformation of human to use wolf magic, or it was a form of mental illness of a person believed that they could become a wolf. Today's physician recognized this as a type that is a real disorder. It's a rare condition that people have um, believe that they are transformed or have transformed into non human animals. Another explanation for werewolves is hallucination brought on by drugs. Uh, Literally, evidence suggests that the trance or the endowed of the berserkers were supposed to increase the strength and speed, and they may have been caused by hallucinogenic mushrooms. Another commonly cited hallucinogenic was contributed to werewolf delusion was the fungus um, that was poisoning and also was used during the witch trials. And it was the rye, the wheat, the barley, and oats and food sources. And when ingested, this infected rye, um, uh, let me stop that. Okay. This infected rye, and we've all heard about it with Salem, that it caused hallucinations and physical symptoms like uncontrollable body movements, panic attacks, burning sensation, gangrene even. As recently as 1951, victims of this poisoning in France reported werewolf hallucinations. Yet another proposed medical explanation for the werewolf lore is Ambras syndrome, the disease which causes extreme hair growth that often covers the entire body. And it's documented since the 17th century. It is recognized in a condition today to believe to be caused by a gene mutation. The excessive hair growth in unusual places often cited evidence that this is a werewolf in their human form, and some accuse werewolf that they may have just been suffering from this condition. Is this a condition or some type of evidence that this is actually a true werewolf? No one has ever looked into the genes. No one has ever looked at their DNA to see. Uh, and why? Because scientists and doctors don't believe in werewolves. So then in the 20th century, two new explanations appear: porphyria and rabies. It is a rare genetic disease characterized by the results in, um, they say, a stereotypical werewolf traits: excessive hair growth, wandering, reddish brown teeth, and the rabies virus can cause crazed and frenzied animal behavior, including in wolves, who are driven more aggressive behavior. And when the virus attacks the brain, often against other animals or humans, in humans, symptoms become difficulty swallowing, increased thirst, inflammation of the brain, hypersexuality, irrational fear of water, contraction of the lips, and the desire to want to bite and eat humans. I can't count on the number of times that people have explained to me the reason why anyone was ever believed in werewolves. Is it because the poisoning? Um, is it the flaw in thinking? Is it mental health? Or as the priest wrote early on, that this is a magical form or a witch's curse? I think uh, what they tried to explain, the beliefs actually destroys the power and the wonder of the supernatural. And also, they try to destroy the symbolism and the importance of the monsters. And what do they mean by that? Is the fact that they have been trying to erase the werewolves, and the fact that these could be something that came from Nephilim mixing with women. And not only did they become giants, but they became creatures. And for all of us to understand where the wolves and the monsters remain so powerful and symbols within human imagination, it's due to the fact that Satan can also play tricks on our mind and cause us fear and weak. The proposed explanation for werewolves aren't quite as numerous as the different variations of this monster, but they indicate the desire to understand the strange and deviant behavior, given that the wolves at one point were the most common, most dangerous land based predators. And this happened in Europe. And they would even drag off little children if they were smaller than the wolf and there was a bunch in their pack. It did pose immediate threat to humans. Their connection also to witchcraft. And witchcraft and werewolf seem to go together and perceive threats to humanity. And it isn't all surprising the fear of the werewolf in the medieval and early modern periods seems to be the possibility that the body might be able to change. The mental capacity to shed one identity um, so dramatically into another body or a form, persona, that seems really monstrous. But then to become violent and unpredictable, to want to eat humans, uh, we may need to have that one explained. The crimes in humanity that they commit against one another. The werewolf is one of the most well known monsters that we've uh, uncovered in history. And they say, well, what about the vampire? Well, that was Vlad. And Vlad was a whole different story. But these creatures, these werewolves, we continue more and more to uncover that the true meaning of the werewolf or legends going back thousands of years into Europe and how they looked at Christianity and the tragedies positioned the wolf shapeshifter as demonic threats and fears ultimately culminated. And of course, they tortured and executed them. There is usually a fine line between the fact and fiction, and it comes to the monsters also. So, when did the great threat of werewolves become something largely redesigned from the pages of fiction? During industrialization, urbanization, and rapid scientific advancement in the 19th century, the werewolf was increasingly positioned into literary of fantasy rather than a real threat. The werewolf slunk back into the symbol of the past, but modern literature and a silver screen reinvigorated the werewolf legend. Most contemporary idea and the conceptions of the werewolf became dominated and driven into film, and they still are. We've moved the werewolf from the realms of mythology and from the tales of priests and Christians and from skinwalkers to Europe to the Nordic monsters. We've given the large scope of the folklore collection, like of Brothers Grimm. It's not surprising that in 1812, the German folklore includes the story of a man that transforms into a werewolf using a special belt. Variations of the story became the most common werewolf story in Germany. The popularity of the Grimm brothers' publications helped launch werewolf into the mainstream literature. And the first in the 19th century novel appears around the time of Grimm Tales too. It's an 1824 historical romance called The Abiginus, written in Irish Gothic novelist Charles Maturin and set in the 13th century. A character within the text wakes from a nightmare and finds himself under attack by a wolf. Not only just a wolf, but a man wolf. And with fiery eyes and white fangs and claws, uh, this horde frenzy that causes him to act with wolfishness. Later, the attacker confesses, I am a fangless wolf, a wolf man now, although he says his fur grows on the inside and he grew it that way so others wouldn't know. The Gothic continued to evolve alongside the influence of what they called the pulpy penny dreadfuls. This came out in weekly, and it was a sensation for violent stories. The perfect place for the first savage werewolf for his transformation. The serialized as Penny Dreadful, and it was published in 1847. And Wagner Werewolf is often considered the first English text to have werewolf as its main character. Set in Germany, it opens with a mysterious man and the elderly Wagner, the chance to be young and handsome again, to have great fortunes, and to rival in his riches. But there are two conditions that the doctor tells this aging man. The old man must be the stranger's companion for a year, and he must prey upon the human race as a werewolf. Wagner accepts the offering uh, and drinks the contents of the small vial, and he loses consciousness. But when he wakes up, the old man is not only young, but he's healthy and intelligent, way better than he was in his earlier life. It is later revealed that the deal was made with John Faust and Wagner, and is now immortal, but must turn a werewolf once a month. And as the description that changes intense, convulsing horribly and shrieking, Wagner's body elongates from its human form into the savage brute shape. His beautiful clothes become rough, shaggy, and wiry looking skin. And with a howl of misery, he becomes the monstrous wolf. After the mid 19th century, werewolf accounts in literature were often presented with some kind of backward or strange local value, lower class, and the creatures were dismissed as a rational explanation. Um, as an example, found in the study of werewolves in English language, Sabian Berlin Gould. He had a book in 1865 of werewolves, the account of a terrible superstition. And a priest folklore collection claimed that while the werewolf legends were present across all nations, they could all be explained by real causes of human violence that inspired monstrous behavior. And it's usually cannibalism or brought on by mental madness. The book did collect werewolf tales from a variety of historic and folkloric sources, serving as a werewolf anthology of a sorts. Uh, and while science and religion continue to try to explain away these stories, people's appetite uh, for this stories wasn't going anywhere. And the creature's variation inspired fresh narratives, like the introduction of the female she wolf. In the late 19th century, stories of female werewolves were white fur. They come from the white wolves, they say, the white wolf, or also the witch with a white wolf. And she wolves correspond to sudden appearances of a beautiful young stranger. And the woman's real wolf identity is often indicated when her human form and her unusual eyes, they say, and also for her wanting to wear a lot of white fur. Stories like The White Wolf of Kostapachin in 1899, The Werewolf of Hostman, written in 1896, and The Other Side of Steinbach, written in 1893, and solidified the presence of a female wolf in horror, another beautiful, threatening creature contributing already to the role of supernatural, monstrous women in Gothic literature. And at the turn of the century, mostly as a result of increased attention towards psychology, werewolves became more associated with the ideas of the beast within. And it was written with in the um, the werewolf trials that to watch for women in white, women that wore white, women that wore white and were witches, and that it was only, they said, less than 5% of werewolves were a she wolf, and they claimed it was a hidden illness or a monstrous personality concealed by evil. And they even say that the women, I like this one, that when you meet a very evil woman and she's evil to the heart and there is nothing good about her, more than likely you're looking at a she wolf. Will she bite you? We don't know, but be careful. Be careful in the dark. They also reverted back to being the most exclusive and more male. And the reason for this more frequent depiction of the female victims started with Richard Baggett's novel, A Roman Mystery, which detailed the male wolf, but also a lurid attack of his sister in law, the helpless woman attacked by sexuality aggressive wolfmen, proved to be popular. And it was taken in these penny dreadfuls. It's in pulp magazine and novels, and eventually film. Movies definitely changed the werewolf popular imagination. Uh, and you look back centuries ago, um, and since 16th century France, even before and after, that's where the movies want to take it. But where werewolf legend from centuries ago were often based around serial killers that terrorized the land. The Beast of Godavin, or the Werewolf of Dole. These were based on men that were serial killers and slaughtered, and folklore that pointed out that these men were mentally gone and evil. And so exploring and understand those acts by they were claiming to be transforming into literal monsters. It wasn't the fact that they grew uh, fur and fangs and teeth. It was the fact they transformed into something so evil they had to be contained and locked up. And movie depictions internalizes this. It put murder and unwitting accomplice into um, body fighting for control. Um, so we all only know about cinema's first werewolf from movie reviews and historical documents. Um, and the first werewolf is in 1913. It was a silent film called The Werewolf. Movie reviews and historical documents, the film was destroyed. The film, Denis Navajo, woman marries a white man, and after he is killed, is led to believe he abandoned her in anger, and she becomes a witch and raises their daughter to hate white men. And the daughter grows and leads a revolt against a group of friars for safeguarding the jealous white men who killed her lover. And during the confrontation, she turns into a wolf after being uh, shown a crucifix. So, following year, 1914, the white wolf again borrowed from a skewed perception of Indian legends and lovers. Also, we don't know the exactly how the transformation is depicted in the film, and so it has been lost to time. Uh, Basically, um, everything that all of these movies were actually burnt up on the film lot where it was stored. These horror and werewolf films were made in the shadow of federal policies that persecuted Indian populations, including seizing their native lands and uh, establishment of mandatory Christian boarding schools also. And the earliest surviving werewolf film is Wolf Blood, released, they say, in 1925, and it's first known of the white werewolf in North America. And it in it, a man living in a remote logging camp receives life-saving blood transfusion of a tame female wolf. So after that, you can imagine. So after the 20th century, films contributed uh, significantly to the modern werewolf stories, like The Werewolf of London in 1935, an on screen depiction of a werewolf bite transforming another human being into a werewolf. The Werewolf of London is a Universal Studios first of the werewolf films, they claim. In the movie, East Asia is the source of the werewolf curse, and the man character, botanist Dr. Glendon, is bitten in Tibet by a werewolf while collecting a rare flower. So then the potential. Let's see. I'm sorry. Um, the other one, the what we found out was they wanted to blame it on the spread of infectious diseases and the growing fear of East Asia to the Western world. Now, the other one, what didn't make this film very popular was one that we all know about. It was Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff in the film A Vampire and the Bride of Frankenstein. The Werewolf of London was quickly overshadowed because A Vampire and Frankenstein's creature. But luckily enough, Universal didn't give up on the werewolf. Uh, they years later Wolfman with quite a few of these old stars led to a werewolf surge. And and the stars that played the early parts of the werewolf, um, became the most popular werewolves even today. The Wolfman from 1941, because of the traits of the werewolf, it brings out the still retains today the modern idea that maybe there is the real werewolf. So we start with Lon Chaney Jr., a rather helpless American that is coming over to Wales in order to inherit his family and traveling to recur uh, vehicles of the supernatural. And so as it goes, you know the movie, he becomes affected and he becomes a monster. And of course, we understand werewolves transform because once you get bitten, once you get infected, then you become a werewolf. And sure enough, we have launched um, a, a whole set of movies that uh, is around the full moon and the howling of the wolf. But not just that, um, but we also look at what we see today. a violent animalistic trait, violent monsters is necessary for him to become the more famous werewolf. And it's then you have a remarkable um, you have remarkable movies, and not only that, but is the cases that are being covered up now of these mental people that still think they're werewolves, and is and have these psychologists that these people go to that claim they're a werewolf. Have they ever really done any current studies or anything to say that the werewolf actually still exists? Um, so the Werewolf of London was the next one. Jack Pierce did both of those makeups, and it was um, basically crystallized a tragic horror in the movie, and the history of real monsters. Um, you, there is a portion that I do want to touch on, and it was it was World War II, and they were the Nazi parties had a side troop that were called werewolves, and it's because they were so cruel and torturous that they not only did they campaign and also call themselves werewolves, but they that 1944 they developed Operation Werewolf as mass poisoning, a plot that was never successfully implemented. But this is how cruel these men were, of the Nazis and the SS. So let's see. Um, Other anxieties of the decade um, was uh, farther along when we got in after World War II, and we thought that the werewolf craze was over. And it was approximately about 10 years later when the next movie that came out that was, they say, the start of a new craze of the werewolf. And what was it? It was I Was a Teenage Werewolf in 1957. And this movie is uh, basically, they say, the first ever that specifically put a teen as a werewolf. And then, in fact, since then, there has been so many movies and shows and books. Some like Snaps, Harry Potter, the Twilight series. And in 1964, television saw its first comedian werewolf. And you wouldn't believe who they say is the uh, goes down in history as the best comedic werewolf, and that is Eddie Munster from the show The Munsters. Another one they say was Dark Shadows. It also includes werewolf, further expanding the monster's influence the small screen. Um, the werewolf films started picking back up 1960s and 70s, where the narratives rise for what they call silly little werewolf movies, like Werewolf on Wheels, The Boy Who Cried Werewolf, even behind Watergate scandal, The Werewolf of Washington. Globally, werewolf films of the 70s took changing sexual politics to a parallel of growing revolution. British Legend of the Werewolf in 1975 with The Legend of the Werewolf. Um, and so as we go on, we could see the rebirth and the violent transformation of the scenes that would become a hallmark in werewolf films to where it wasn't so sexual like it was in the 60s and 70s to a beast that wanted to tear into flesh. And the audience fascination with grotesque change from human to werewolf also corresponds. They want to see it in slow mo, of how he becomes the werewolf. So uh, it wasn't until, they say, in 1981 where it started really depicting the change. And that was the film The Howling. And that was from a 1977 book. Um, so um, there is, I could go through so many movies, folks. And that they do say uh, that it's the movies that have kept the infamous werewolf alive. Is there werewolves? Um, if you go by the early writings of the priest, um, uh, the witches, I don't know if we could go on the witch trials or not, because they were just torturing and burning anybody that seemed like a witch. Um, but I really want to go back to 1300. That's the time of the dragons, also. But it was their werewolves. I believe there could be. I believe that um, we are looking at something that is, I'm going to say, is demonic. I don't think they can transform fully into a wolf, but I think they can claim they are. Look at the zombies on the streets of Philadelphia and Chicago and San Francisco, where they're even claiming that these are people so strong on heroin they want to bite people. So that is a possibility that is a mental madness to the point of evilness. And this, they say, with the priest, that this is what really led to the demonic exorcisms that we see today. That people actually think that they've got these demons inside of them, and they can contort their bodies. As we see, the werewolf. And there's so many movies. I was a teenage werewolf. Then we got American, um, what was the name of American Werewolf? American Werewolf in London. There you go. What about that song, Werewolves in London? We have kept the werewolf alive for years, for since what they say 1300, when the werewolf decided to show himself. And so are there werewolves? Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe just some really misguided souls with demons inside of them. That's what I think. I believe that with the priests, that this is a demonic, and maybe the werewolves died a long time ago, but there are people that are gullible enough to believe. And what about the hair that grows on these people? Um, you know, they haven't done enough studies on them, and that is something that the wolf scientists really want to know. And when they ask for tests to be done to see if these are actual wolves, they are laughed at. They are basically ruin their careers. So we don't. Um, they don't want really to go to the point of ruining their careers, so they have backed off. But I think we really do need to know, what is the cause of this uh, thing where uh, they are born with all this hair and that covers the face. And you've seen the pictures of it when you've seen the slideshow. And this is a disease, they say. Or is it a type of wolf? Well, I guess we'll never know, because they don't want to run the scientific uh, onto to see if there's a form, a canine, or a form of wolf in the bloodstream. Aha, they just want to laugh it off. So, with that, folks, that is the end of tonight's show. And I hope you enjoyed learning about the werewolf. Um, and I think we just need to leave it at the movies and have the movies push it forward. Because I sure don't want no wolf man looking them through my window. Um, Even though I do a she-wolf every year for Halloween, it's a lot of fun. But don't worry, I don't bite, and I don't want to eat people. No. Maybe twist their arms, but I don't bite. And so, with that, you guys, please subscribe and hit the like button. And if you didn't catch it at the beginning of the show, um, we had a Bigfoot guy shared my story this morning. So go back and watch the first part. If not, um, it is how to bow hunt. Um, and it's on YouTube, and it's right about the 27 mark. It's a show from this morning. Um, I'll try to get it out there again tomorrow morning. I'll re-give out, put it in the description box for you guys. Let's see if I can still have it. I believe, I believe that's it. If not, hopefully, if it isn't, let me know in the morning when I do my shows, and I'll get you guys a good link to it. His name's Steve, and he reads Bigfoot stories. And I submitted one to him, and I also let him know um, my thoughts of Nephilim and the giants and the Bigfoots. And he's been speaking a little bit on it. And if you like Bigfoot stories, he's a good one. All he does is read them. Doesn't matter if you believe or not. He just likes to read the stories. So, um, folks, with that, hit the like button um, over there in Facebook. Please hit the follow and the like, and share this. Share Legends of Myths and Monsters. Uh, Legends will be back next Monday, but we will be on in the morning with the morning weather show and news. Uh, so, with that, you guys have a wonderful Monday and go watch I Was a Teenage Werewolf or Teen Wolf, one of the favorite werewolf movies that you like. Maybe you're a Lon Chaney fan. Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, and the werewolf was in that one too. If you like Abbott and Costello, so many movies with so many werewolves. All right, folks, we will see you in the morning, and uh, uh, I guess that's it. So I was trying to get out of my page there. It wasn't going down. So with that, you guys, please share, subscribe, hit the bell so you can get notified when our shows are on. And we will see you in the morning. Bye bye.